Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the very first episode of COASTER-net Uncut. Every week, we will take you on a coaster journey throughout the industry, giving you our uncut opinion on the theme parks and rides that we love here at COASTER-net. I'm, of course, Andy Rybarczyk.
And I'm Danny Miller. It's good to have everyone here with us. Uncut opinions. Exciting.
And we'll be your two hosts for this journey. We'll try and do a show every week here at COASTER-net Uncut. And like I said, it's just going to be about our opinions, about rides, about news, just everything that's going on big in the industry this week. We're going to talk about it here, and we're going to give you the uncut version of everything we say. So we're not going to have all these simple edits. It's full on, full force every single time. Let's do it.
Yeah, and if you don't like what we say, too bad.
Too bad. Go listen to a different show.
That's all right. We're glad to have everyone here.
Well, we thought we'd start our first episode and talk a little bit about ourselves. So, Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about your street cred?
Yeah, all right. Well, street cred here. Go through the roof right away. So I'm Danny Miller. A lot of people know me as Dan the T-shirt guy. If you're a listener of Coaster Radio, if you've read my blogs before on COASTER-net, you probably have heard that nickname at least a couple of times on Twitter at Dan the T-shirt guy. So I'm at 399 roller coasters right now, and I don't think I'm going to hit 400 before the end of the season. Hockey getting started up this week at school, so I don't know, Andy. I don't know that I'm going to get on a new one, so maybe one of the rides that we're going to talk about tonight might have to be 400 next year. We'll get into those a little bit later, but been with COASTER-net, coming up on 3 years now.
Wow.
3 years at the end of February, I think. So 2.5 years, coming up on 3, longer than you. We've known each other since, really we met at Gatekeeper Media Day, so about 1.5 years now, and we've met up at parks a couple times since then. We were at Banshee Media Day, Great America a couple years ago. I've been to almost every major park in the U.S. Valley Fair is one of the last ones that I have to get to. Aside from that, I think pretty much all the big ones. Silverwood is another one I haven't been to. I don't know that I call that a major park, but, one that's got a couple of good coasters there. So, I haven't been to La Ronde in Montreal either. I'm close to that one up here in New York, but just haven't found the time to get there yet. So, But I've been to Canada's Wonderland. Was just there yesterday, so I've been there. But so what about you? What's your story?
Well, I to give my street cred, I'm about right at 300. I haven't really topped 300 yet. I got 300. If you saw the COASTER-net TV vlog I did the other month, basically I got it on a dragon wagon. Did it? But I thought it was kind of
that was a cool piece you put together there.
Well, it was from the same park that I rode my first roller coaster at. It's actually it wasn't the same exact ride, obviously, but it had the same name. So it was my first roller coaster was called Dracor, and this one was also called Dracor as well. So I thought it was kind of cool that I have number 1 and number 300 being the same named coaster at the same park, just,
But they were different rides.
Just like 30 years apart from each other. So it was fun, to do that, and it was a nice little 300. Cause I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like in your position. I'm like, well, I was at 290. I was actually at 298, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, where can I go to get 2 coasters that are big? I'm thinking Canada's Wonderland. I haven't been up there. I said, do I really want to go up there this season though? Will I have the time to? So it's all this different stuff, and and then I was thinking about. We were supposed to do a meetup down at Dollywood. I'm like, well, I could get Wild Eagle as number 300, but I'm like, it's a good ride, but is that a 300 ride? And then it kind of dawned on me that Twitter spoke to me Twitter sometimes speaks to me. I don't know about you, but Twitter definitely speaks to me. It's actually how I ended. It's how I actually ended up on COASTER.net a little bit too. So Twitter spoke to me in this case, and I just saw a tweet that said that they were opening up the Wildcat roller coaster, which is a relocated ride that was supposed to open up last season at Santa's Village, and this year it ended up opening up. So I said, well, why don't I go up there and do Wildcat as number 299 and then do Dracor as number 300? Now I got a little story, I got some backstory. I said it's kind of cool, something different. Who has number 300 as the Dragon Wagon? Come on, who does that? No one.
Well, and now to clarify, this is the Santa's Village near you in Illinois, is it?
Yes. It's
not the one in New Hampshire. You didn't drive all the way to New Hampshire for a Dragon Wagon.
I did not. That would be crazy. No, this is the one in Illinois. It was it's always been there. It's a small regional park. It's in Elgin, and they closed up for a little bit of time. They sold off all their Christmas themed rides to different places around the country, and they've just tried to start reopening in the last few years. So like this new Wildcat coaster there is like their new big addition, trying to reclaim some of the glory that they had. It's a nice little park. It's, if you have the time, it's 2 credits. It'll probably take, if everything's open, it'll take you about 25 minutes to run through the park and you'll be done.
Sounds like Gilroy Gardens in a way, although Gilroy Gardens had some neat stuff out there. That's a neat little park if you're out in Northern California. I suggest that one. But it sounds like the same kind of feel, geared towards kids and families, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they have like sleigh rides and like animals. It's kind of like, it's also like a zoo as well. That's like their new gimmick. It was never a zoo before, but now that's like their new thing, is that they're trying to make it into a zoo, as well as a quasi amusement park. But speaking of Twitter, that's basically how I got to COASTER.net. That, I started, following all these different sites on Twitter. I followed, all the big ones. COASTER.net was one of them. And then one day somebody put out a tweet that said, we're looking for people to come and work for us. So I said, why not? It might be fun. I was just about getting into, I was doing a lot of Cedar Point stuff at that point in my life. I had been going to Cedar Point for 20 years, every single year with my family. Been going to Cedar Point a lot more these last few years, sometimes, 6-7 times. Each, and that doesn't seem like a lot to some people, but, for me, it's like a 5-hour drive every time I go. And even then, it might not seem.
So that's a commitment when you go there.
Yeah, exactly. And even so, some people might go more than often. I'm not trying to say that's a huge burden, but it costs money to do that. So I get this tweet. It says, well, come write for us. So I met some of the guys on COASTER.net. We talked to like Daniel and Dwayne, talked it over, and I said, you know what, I want to do this. And since then, that was like February of 2013, and since then, it's just been doing more and more stuff with the site, and now we're here with you. I keep talking in the kingly we for some reason. I keep saying we. No. I don't know why. I should say now I'm here with you. But it's we're here. Like,
do you have someone else in the room with you?
Multiple personalities, maybe. I don't know what's going on here. This guy's kind of nuts. It's why it's uncut, baby. It's uncut. So that's what brought me here, and now we're uncut. now we're on COASTER.net Uncut, having fun apparently. So
yeah, it's fun so far.
It's fun so far. Hopefully it stays that way. So today, I think our major purpose for today is going to be talking about the new rides of 2014. 2015 rides is what we're going to do. 2014, rides, not a lot of fun right now. Like we kind of already know what they all are.
Announced in 2014. They were announced in 2014, True. So I mean technically. But
True. So let's look at probably what the most anticipated coaster for this announcement season, and let's look at Fury. So why don't you take us through what Fury's all about here, Danny?
All right, so Fury 325. One of the animations is my desktop background on my computer right now. So I'm looking at the pretty ride entrance plaza with all those honeycomb shaped things going over the queue line right now.
Nice.
So Fury 325 essentially everyone knows about Leviathan, that big B&M Giga coaster up there in Canada that I was on yesterday. Fury 325 is kind of kicking that up a notch. It's a little bit taller, a little bit faster, considerably longer. It's not. Some people thought it would be a little bit longer, but not much. But it's considerably longer. Leviathan. Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know the exact length. I want to say it's like 54.85. It was a trivia question at the park yesterday. But Fury is going to be 6,602 feet, which according to their little video there during the unveiling, that's the longest steel coaster in North America.
Really?
So I believe that's what he said. I think California Screamin' is somewhere in like the 6,500 mark. And Millennium Force is in the 6,000s. I think it's like 61 something. So,
Leviathan is 54.86. I just looked it up.
Okay, so I was off by a foot. Maybe the
and you
maybe
said
the
you've
metric
been on coasters. What? You don't know that. Get out of here.
They're on metric foots.
Oh, that's true.
Metric foots. So Fury, 325 feet, hence the name Fury 325. I'm hoping that's where it's coming from. 325 feet tall, 95 mile per hour top speed, 6602 in terms of footage, and a ride time, I believe, of 3 minutes and 25 seconds. Now, if Leviathan is any indication, I'm saying about half of that is going to be the lift hill, maybe a little bit less because it is a little bit longer. But so for Leviathan, after you drop off the lift to the time you hit the brake run is about 55 seconds or so, depending on how fast it's running. But it's somewhere in like the 50 to 60 second mark. This I timed just the animation. It's a little over a minute of action time. So, and who knows how accurate those animations are. I'm guessing just based on the pure speed, it's probably going to have action time of somewhere between like a minute and a minute 10, a minute 15, somewhere in that range. So, and Millennium Force isn't much different than that. And even though it's a really long track, it's over a mile long, you're hauling the mail the whole way through this course. If you've seen the videos, it doesn't seem like it's going to be losing a whole lot of speed. So you're going to be ripping through that track rather quickly. So
now I always caution people because I remember, when I watched the Gatekeeper announcement, and I felt that train was whipping through the track too. And the first thing that struck me when I was at Media Day that morning at 4 or 5 a.m. or whatever time it was it looked really slow to me. And it looked slow because that animation just made it look so fast. And I don't know if they purposely do that or it's whatever program they use makes it so that it just feels faster. I don't know what it is, but I would be a little cautious.
I think the animations are a little faster. I think it was John Hildebrand when in the documentary that Devin Olsen did. From Dreams to Screams. He said, and Rob Decker said it too, that it was faster than they thought it was going to be. Gatekeeper we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look that fast when you're on the ground, but when you're on it, it's greased lightning.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's flying.
It certainly is a fast coaster once you're on it. It doesn't look like it because the trains are so massive and they're so long. But it really is a fast coaster. And now Leviathan looks fast. And my sister said it best. It feels fast. The whole thing feels fast. You don't lose much speed. And maybe part of that is because it is the shorter train, whereas the newer B&M Hypercoasters have the longer train. So they look a little bit more sluggish just because it's a longer train. You have a nice short train here, 8 rows, just like Leviathan, whereas like Nitro, Raging Bull, all those were 9 rows, but Leviathan and Fury will be 8 rows. So it is a shorter train, so you'll probably not have much of a variation in ride experience from front to back. Leviathan is that way. The front to back, the ride is very much the same. Little bit of a difference on the first drop. but not as much as you might think. But if Fury 325's drop is anything like Leviathan's, Leviathan probably has my favorite first drop of any coaster I've been on, especially at night when you got the little red beady eyes lighting up on the tunnel there. But if Leviathan is any indication of what Fury 325 is going to be, I expect it to be nothing short of fantastic.
Now, you heard me say that I haven't been to Canada's Wonderland yet, so we'll have to defer to your knowledge here. But I know one of the concerns going into this, I have to say that this is probably one of the most speculated coasters we've had in a while. Now, we had some fun with Banshee last year with the whole Bat wing coaster deal. This program, this campaign was right up there with that, with us really scratching our heads trying to figure out what was going on. But before we get into that, a lot of the speculation when we heard, because the initial rumor was obviously Giga Coaster, that came out when we figured out the name of Fury 325, even though people questioned whether or not that name would actually stick. The immediate assumption was, a Giga Coaster made by B&M. And a lot of the speculation, revolved around, is this going to be different enough from Leviathan to actually make it worthwhile? Because you don't want to just clone stuff and put it in different places. So I'll ask you, do you feel that this is going to be different enough between these two coasters?
So the first part of that question, or I guess the first part of the answer to that question is, first off, for us, like the coaster enthusiasts, it's going to now be compared to Leviathan. When Leviathan was first announced, the big question was, is this just a bigger, faster behemoth?
Mm-hmm.
The short answer is no, it's not. And they're very different rides, and having ridden them both yesterday, I can attest that I've ridden both of them over 50 times. They are very different coasters. Behemoth, just to kind of pick out a coaster that more people are familiar with, at least in the group that'll probably be, joining us from, week to week. Behemoth is very much like Diamondback. It is airtime hill, turn around, airtime hill. Just to give you, if you probably seen pictures of Behemoth, but you've got the drop, you've got an airtime hill, you've got a hammerhead, and then you've got 3 hills back to back to back along the lake, along the lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got your mid-course, you have a double helix, and then it switches direction and rises. Then you do another airtime hill, then you're on the brake run. So Behemoth is very much an airtime coaster, whereas Leviathan is essentially the B&M version of Millennium Force. I've made that jump on the forum several times and compared the elements. Literally, if you put the layouts next to each other, they're almost exactly the same. If Intamin would have built Leviathan, nobody would have questioned whether or not they were similar. It's just the fact that Leviathan was B&M that comparison even came up. What after the first drop of Millennium Force, what's the next element?
You have you have the quasi overbanked into the speed turn into the airtime.
Right. So on Leviathan, you have the tunnel, and then you have an overbank turn. Now you have a small speed hill, which Millennium Force saves till later in the ride. But then you have a big airtime hill, and then you've got a turnaround. You've got a high bank turn, which is what you get on Millennium Force. You get the turnarounds on Millennium Island. Mm-hmm. You get a turn into another airtime hill. Then you get another overbank on Leviathan, and then you're in the brake run, and that's where Millennium Force has its speed hill. Then you do the overbank into the brake run. So really, when you put the rides side by side, the layouts are shaped differently, but the elements are all the elements are the same. They're just kind of in a slightly different order. Fury, to me, is very different from Intimidator, and that's one thing I've noticed. Nobody is saying, well, Fury 325 is kind of just a bigger Intimidator. I haven't heard that said once. Yeah. And I think that's because we kind of know that Leviathan wasn't a bigger behemoth. There was a different focus. It's kind of like in Knoebels, you got the Phoenix, which is behind me here, and then you got Twister. Twister's all lats. Phoenix is all airtime, right? So you got two rides. Yeah, I know. So you've got two rides that very much complement each other. The better airtime coaster at Cedar Point is honestly Magnum. That's really the big airtime coaster, or even a Blue Streak. Most people, when you talk about Millennium Force, almost nobody will say that that's an airtime coaster because it's not. It's got three good spots of airtime, and after that, it's a lot of turns, and it's very much a speed coaster. Leviathan, after the first drop, you got three good spots of airtime, and after that, it's all speed and turns, which is what Fury is. The Fury layout is a lot of turns. It's all turns and overbanks in the first half, and then after that turnaround, you've got another high bank, then you've got a big hill, you've got a helix, and you've got a couple of airtime hills to end the ride. So it's interesting that they kind of went with all turns the first half and then mostly hills the second half with like a helix thrown in. So I'm interested to see how this one performs and how this one will end up, comparing to the others, because it's almost like you've got two different rides. Leviathan and Millennium Force, you've got some airtime mixed in with the turns and the speed. This one kind of stays low to the ground and does a lot of speed in the first half, and then the second half, it's more of your traditional hypercoaster where it's more airtime. So I'm interested to see how this one turns out. I think it's going to be really good, and I'm glad it does have some airtime, for the airtime folks like me. I'm really glad it does have those big hills towards the end of the ride. The only thing that I would change if you gave me Fury 325's layout, the speed hill that Leviathan has, where it's a small airtime hill and then a slight bank to the left, I wish one of the two low to the ground overbank turns on Fury was one of those hills, just to kind of change it up. Because after the first drop, you get that high overbank turn, then then you kind of come down to the left, you do an overbank to the right, then an overbank to the left, and then the turnaround. I wish that overbank that went to the right was one of those speed airtime hills into like a curving maneuver. That's the only thing I would change. The turnaround looks really cool, especially since you're kind of like on your side at the top of it. So that's something that B&M hasn't done yet. So to answer your question, for me, this is different enough from their other coasters that I'm going to be excited about it, and that it's not going to feel like some of the other coasters. Diamondback, Intimidator, Behemoth, they do kind of have a similar feel to them because you do have similar elements. It's the same train style. This is going to be different enough that it's not going to feel like I'm just on Leviathan in North Carolina. I think it is going to be different enough for me.
Well, and that definitely was the fear. Like you covered you covered like the layout here. So I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about the theming of this ride, because that was like a lot of where the speculation was coming from with this is throughout the whole process, we had so many different ideas that obviously the park threw out the name Centurion. We had media invites with different color schemes. We had the B&M track, at the factory that we kind of suspected was going to be this Fury track, but we really didn't know. And then the park had a ton of clues, and the park's clues are kind of crazy when you start looking back at them, because at the time we're thinking, okay, a lot of it had a Roman theme to it, and they were using Roman numerals. They were talking about the great wonders of the world. They were talking about the Colosseum. Right. And back, way before this even, back at the beginning of August, like a few weeks before this, announcement dropped, I kind of started thinking about, well, wait a minute, what if all of this is pushing us towards, a B theme? Because we all know that Charlotte is, the basketball team there is named the Charlotte Hornets. They weren't always named the Charlotte Hornets. This is a recent change in the past year or so where they're going back to the original name, which, as a kid, the Charlotte Hornets were always my favorite team. I liked Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson, and I had a Charlotte Hornets starter jacket. Like if you're like, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the starter jackets.
Yeah, it seems like everybody had those. I mean, they definitely had the coolest color scheme and the coolest logo. That branding of the Charlotte Hornets was like, that was the pinnacle of mid 90s branding. It was bright colors, obscure colors like purple and teal, and cartoony logos. All those 1990s NBA, NHL, NFL logos. They're cartoony. They've got bright colors, and then in the early 2000s, everybody went to black. But that was the epitome of the 1990s, right there.
And when I saw the media invite, it just started making me think. Like, the media invite had the honeycomb background. It had this teal in it. Obviously, they've changed the colors enough so that the team doesn't sue them, obviously, because they don't want to do a licensing agreement here. But the colors and just the honeycomb, and I started putting things together, and I started thinking about, well, wait a minute. What if they were going to go with this bee theme? And then they released the idea of when they started sending out packages, they had them all in beekeeper costumes with nets and all of this. And they started releasing more stuff, with phrases like, "You can't stop me, you can only help to contain me," which is obviously a Dan Patrick quote when he was back on SportsCenter. He used to use that all the time.
Yep.
So it just started tying it all together, and it ended up being that, Fury 325. The name to the swarm idea is kind of a loose. I don't really still understand the Fury and the swarm. I get it, it's obvious.
It's a loose connection.
It's a loose connection, but I also think there was an obvious there that they don't want another B&M named Swarm. Obviously, you have that out in England with one of their wing coasters out there. But the park played us a few times on this, like the Centurion, having all the in-park stuff be very Roman, very gladiator-like, that even when you were there, you saw the video that had the Roman armor and even had a wing coaster,
that was a wing coaster train. And I said when I saw that video, I said, I don't know if that's a red herring or if that is something that is really linked to this new ride, or if it's something for somewhere else or something down the road. But you will not convince me that it wasn't a wing coaster train in that video. And you since watched a better quality video version of that video, and you agreed with me, and Dwayne immediately said it, and my sister and aunt who were there with us, they immediately said that. And actually, the person from the general public who was there with us, my aunt's friend, when we showed her the video, she was like, "Oh, that looks like that Gatekeeper roller coaster that you showed me earlier today." She said that, and she wasn't a coaster person.
Exactly.
So, I mean, right there. But obviously, that's, that wasn't it. The whole swarm thing, I don't know where that's coming in. I mean, not to foreshadow what we're going to talk about next year, but it's kind of like the link to Thunderbird and Thanksgiving. Like, it's kind of a loose connection, but it does make some sense once you kind of wrap your head around the idea of it.
And I like that the park is trying to tie itself to the city. That I really think the parks need more of that. All parks need more of that. That they need to tie themselves to the local area, because that's your main customer base. And it's even cool for people coming in from outside to get that. Like, even at Kings Island, when you get the Cincinnati Reds grill, that's something cool that you can go to the park and see that this is. I know it's just a sports team, but this is part of the local area, and this is part of who these people are at some point, at some level.
Sure.
And it's cool just to experience that and have that in the park and make these connections, with these different organizations. I'd love to see parks do more of that, bringing, and I think Cedar Fair does a fairly good job of bringing in outside companies that you look at, like Kings Island again, you have Skyline Chili, stuff like that, Chicky and Pete's for Dorney. But
exactly. That was a Philadelphia thing. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That was a Philadelphia thing, and Dorney Park, New York City and Philadelphia are their two big areas. So when you get Philly people going to Dorney Park, they know what Chickies and Pete's are. They know what crab fries are, and it's successful there. So they decide to say, well, hey, maybe this will work at a Cedar Point. And I don't know, but every time I go, I always go to Chickies and Pete's when I'm at Cedar Point, because I really like Chickies and Pete's, and it's always packed. I mean, it's better than the generic branding of like a game
Absolutely.
day grill. Like the game day grill doesn't have anything special to it. Maybe at Cedar Point, Chickies and Pete's isn't as special, but at Dorney Park, when Philadelphia people can kind of get that little taste of home, and Canada's Wonderland, the whole Wonder Mountain thing, that's like the icon of that park since it opened. So to not have an attraction in that mountain was kind of a crime. So to really make like something that, hey, no other park can do this and do it right. They have to do something different, because only Canada's Wonderland can have the Wonder Mountain's Guardian thing and have it tied around that mountain, because no other park really has that mountain. You have other parks with mountains and structures, but you can't just duplicate it like you can a Windseeker or a Boomerang or something.
And what I like about Cedar Point, too, is they've been trying – like, they have their own stuff. So they have, like, Toff's Ice Cream, which is a local dairy place that serves really good ice cream. But they also kind of started bringing in all these places from other parts of the country. So, like you said, Chickie and Pete's came from Dorney. A few years back, they also opened up the Pink's Hot Dogs, which I love. I had one out at Knott's when I was out there. A very California thing, bringing it into Sandusky. It was the first one, I think, east of the Mississippi. That's really cool when you can do that and you can make these partnerships with these companies and not only have a local flair, but also bring in something that other people might not get the chance to experience, something like a Pink's Hot Dogs. Or I can tell you what, I would never go to Chickie and Pete's. Like, I'm not in that area, so – to have the opportunity to eat very expensive crab fries, at $8 a bucket, that's something special, I guess.
Right. Well, and again, I'm from that area, so that's something that I grew up with. Every time I go to a Philadelphia Flyers game, I get a bucket of crab fries, because that's what it is.
Wait, hold on. You've gone to a Philadelphia Flyers game? I hate the Philadelphia Flyers. Okay. When's the last time they won the Cup? I wasn't even alive the last time they won the Cup. So
I know I wasn't. I was alive the last time they lost the Cup, and I believe that was to your team.
It was. That was a fun series for sure. But see, this is what happens. This is what happens on COASTER-net Uncut. We get sidetracked. We start talking about food all of a sudden. All of a sudden, we're talking about food. Like, what happened here?
But it all comes back. It's good. It's good to kind of tie that whole hornet's nest of rebellion theme into the area, and that's something that those people get. And judging from, we asked my aunt's friend, her name was Sandy, are people really that excited about the Hornets coming back? And she said, oh yeah, that's been the talk of the town since they announced it, like back in May, that they're changing the name from the Bobcats back to the Hornets. Now that the New Orleans Hornets became the Pelicans, everyone's like, change them back to the Hornets, change them back to the Hornets. And that's a big deal for those people down there. So having this, even though there's not like a marketing agreement there, that's something that those people will get and they'll rally around, even though people like us outside the area, it's not as big of a deal.
And like, I love the logo. I think the logo looks pretty sweet. I love the colors. The colors of the ride really pop. The teal and the yellow, almost like the lime greenish and the white supports. I think it's really going to pop, especially since they're redoing that whole front entrance too, which is the other piece of this announcement, was that they're completely knocking down the entire front entrance, building something that looks very similar to what Cedar Point did with the arch of like ticket windows and stuff. But the only difference here is that Fury's going to go underneath this new plaza, which is going to be really cool, I think, to have it go underneath.
That's gonna be cool.
Now I know
that's gonna be really cool.
I know a few people have commented that they're upset to see the Plantation House go, that was part of the culture there too. And I've seen a few dissenters saying that, I wish they could have done something with that. But I actually like them having the Carowinds sign there. That's one of the definitive things that when I walked into that park, like that was like a centerpiece, was having the big gold Carowinds sign. And now they're making that front and center in this new plaza. And I think that's perfect, actually, to put that there.
Yeah, that's great. And we've seen that with Cedar Fair recently. I believe the interview was actually done on Coaster Radio, to plug them a little bit, when they talked about redoing the front gate at Gatekeeper. And, is this something that you're looking to do at other parks? And he said, well, the real difference between Cedar Fair, this is Matt Ouimet talking, the real difference between Cedar Fair and Six Flags is Six Flags has a bunch of parks, but they create one big brand. You go to a Six Flags park, you go to Great America, you go to Magic Mountain, you go to Great Adventure, you go to New England, they kind of feel the same. Now, the rides are different. Well, some of them are. Some of them are the same. But you have the Batman. You have the Superman. It's all it feels like you're kind of at the same place.
Yeah.
Whereas Cedar Fair, you have like 11 or 12 regional brands that are all different. You've got, aside from the occasional boomerang or an inverted boomerang, you've really got completely different rides. And, most of the rides that are similar are from the former Paramount parks and aren't Cedar Fair's doing. So let's throw that out there and give them credit for that, under the Kinzel era.
Yeah.
So you want to have something different. Kings Island and Kings Dominion, they have very similar entrances, but those are good entrances. You got the big reflecting pool. You've got the Eiffel Tower there. Those are neat entrances to walk into. Now, the gate at Kings Island is kind of like blocking that view.
It's terrible. So, it's absolutely terrible.
You need a new kind of a building, and Kings Dominion is kind of the same way. But once you're in the park, the entranceway is really cool. Canada's Wonderland is kind of the same way. You walk in underneath all the Canadian provincial flags. You walk in, you have the flower bed that forms the Canadian flag. You've got the long reflecting pool with the fountains, and you've got Wonder Mountain right there. Yeah. It's the same thing, but replace the tower with Wonder Mountain. And Cedar Point needed a gate update. Carowinds needed a gate update, and really theirs was a little bridge and then, the sign with the North and South Carolina border going right down the entrance of the park. Now they can make that a prominent feature before you even get into the park, and like Cedar Point, great photo op. And that's something that everyone's going to take photos of it. Yeah. And it's great. And you got people sharing photos before they even get into the park.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to see what they do at other parks too, because especially if they make a roller coaster a part of that entrance. I really like that idea of integrating a roller coaster into the entrance. And now another thing I kind of like about Fury that I didn't know if I was going to like is now they've proven that they can do multiple styles of coaster. Because my thinking was so dead set on Gatekeeper and the way Gatekeeper looked and doing the 2 fly-throughs with the wing coaster. Now with Fury, you have a completely different front entrance look and a different feel to it. So it's almost setting it up so that if like a Worlds of Fun wants an updated front gate, which they need, you could almost do anything there. It just gives you that option to be able to go in there and put a coaster. And I think if you are a coaster company, the first experience should be a roller coaster. It's that's your bread and butter. You're a roller coaster company. You're not a Disney where something else is your bread and butter. It's not roller coasters. You're an amusement or a theme park. So I kind of like that idea of having a roller coaster be your entrance. And I think almost all the parks could use a new entrance.
Well, yeah, and as Rob Decker said in Devin's documentary, it says for Cedar Point, it says we're the roller coaster capital of the world, and for Carowinds, it says we're the thrill capital of the Southeast because that's the thrill capital of the Carolinas, whatever their tagline is. Whatever the tagline is, it says, as Rob Decker said, come on in, we're having a great time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on that, I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Before we leave you, though, we do want to give you some options for this show that, down the road, we do want to make this show interactive. And we have some plans to do that. Obviously, right now we don't have the ability to let you call in or anything like that. But we do want to make it interactive, like on a Skype party almost. We've done it in the past for COASTER-net for big announcements where we brought some people in, had a big party, people talking about what's going on, people talking about the announcement. And we'd like to do something like that for this so that obviously we're not going to be listening in to what you're saying, but if you want to like text in questions as you're listening in to us talk about this live, we think that would be an awesome way to get you guys involved in the show, and we'll be more than happy to answer stuff or read what you have to say based on what we're conversing about at that time. So look for future details on that. Right now, the shows are not live, but in the future we want to do like maybe 1 or 2 a month that we have that live aspect on it.
Yeah, we'd like to get some interaction going, get your thoughts on stuff, especially when we get to the off season. I think once we get into November, December, and the doldrums of winter, in Chicago and Rochester, kind of like the hellhole of winter.
Yes, yes.
I think we're gonna be really itching to talk with some other people out there and get your opinions on stuff. We'll come up with some fun topics. We talked about doing like the favorite versus best debate and stuff like that. Stuff that we've talked about before, maybe in the forums or in blogs, but we want to kind of get feedback, and whether it's, whether you just send us an email and we read it, or you're in like a Skype chat room, we want to get that kind of thing going. So hopefully we can build up like a little audience here that'll do this, because I think we're trying to make this different, because you get so many podcasts and radio shows, they're all very much the same. We want to make this a little different. We got the video aspect here. We want to make it a little interactive, because that's something that not a whole lot of shows out there have. So we want to add that to kind of make ourselves unique.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us here tonight, and thank you for listening to us talk about the great new additions for 2015 that we've gone through. And we hope to see you again here on COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Rybarczyk.
And I'm Danny Miller from Rochester, New York.
And as always, right on, Ride Warriors.